And we'll call the meeting of the September 10th, 2021 meeting of the Circulation ILL Advisory Group to order at 9:35 a.m. So this is our first meeting of this fiscal year, first meeting with a new group. So I just want to start off by just giving a brief, having everyone introduce themselves very briefly. So I'll go first. If you can just, I guess, give your name, your library, and like maybe what department or your role at your library, that would be great, just in case there's some new faces here that you have not encountered at a meeting before. So my name is Mieko. I am the Member Services Librarian for Public Services here at CCS. I am the staff liaison to both the Circulation and Interlibrary Loan Groups. So I'm just going to go through alphabetically by last name. So I'm going to start with Jasmine, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hi, everyone. Again, sorry, my camera's not working, but I'm Jasmine. I work at the Park Ridge Public Library. I am the Patron Services Coordinator, and I also act as backup for Interlibrary Loan.
Thanks. Okay, Carrie?
My name's Carrie. I'm with the Fox River Valley Libraries. I'm the Account Services Manager, AKA the Circulation Manager. And I also, like Jasmine, essentially do backup for ILL here as well.
Jackie.
Got it. Hi there. I'm Jackie Janovicius. I'm with Lake Villa District Library. I'm the Interlibrary Loan Manager, and I do spend some time working in circulation as well to help and back up. So glad to be part of this group.
And next is Brandon.
I am Brandon Marshall, work at the Northfield branch of the Winnetka Northfield Library. I guess my title is branch librarian with an adult focus, so I work on every desk.
And Donna.
I'm Circulation Supervisor at Indian Trails Public Library. And I just work with the checkout and check-in staff in circulation.
And next we would have Maggie from Round Lake. She should be popping in here, I think, later. So we will move on to Anne.
I'm Ann Thomas. I'm head of circulation at Prospect Heights Library. Our ILL actually falls under adult services, so I am not very knowledgeable about it, although I do work a lot with the gal who does our ILL. So bear with me, in other words.
And finally, Lori.
Hi, I'm Lori. I'm from the ELA Library. I'm the Assistant Circulation Manager as well as the Interlibrary Loan Coordinator. And I am lagging badly here on this device, so you'll kind of see me walking around. I'm going to try and find a better spot in the building because I can't hear most of what you're saying.
No, don't hesitate to ask us to repeat something if you need. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do, since it's new group, new fiscal year, I wanted to review the job description for the advisory group and see if there were any questions on like expectations or what the group does. So I am going to just start by sharing my screen here. And we're going to go through a nice little PowerPoint. And I apologize, I realized, I think in the agenda, when I tried inserting the PDF, it ended up being like really blurry. So I apologize if this information was not easy to read on the agenda ahead of time. So the advisory group, essentially, what you guys help us do, you act as consultants for both CCS and the consortium as a whole. So your role is to help us make recommendations for things like proposed system changes, workflow strategies. Sometimes we'll ask you to help us run tests on changes or new features. Other times we will use the group as a sounding board. So, we'll say, here's an idea we're thinking of, exploring, like, what do you think about it? What information would you need to help make a decision? So anytime on the agenda, anytime we expect a formal decision or recommendation, it will be noted under the action section of the agenda. Anytime it's just a general discussion, that will be noted as well. So in terms of like expectations for the group, obviously you're representing your library. All of your libraries are very different. You have different experiences, different expectations from your libraries. But at the same time, we also expect you to represent CCS libraries as a whole. So you kind of have like this dual thought process, like how would a change, or how does this process like affect your library? How is this going to affect all CCS libraries? We do meet 4 times a year. We'll check out the meeting schedule at a slide, a couple slides in the future. And at this point, we are planning on meeting via Zoom for most of it. Aside from the advisory group meetings, you're also expected to attend associated technical groups. So if your primary area is ILL, we hope to see you at the ILL groups. If your primary area is circulation, we hope to see you at the circulation groups. This is for a couple reasons, so that you can help CCS present on any findings and recommendations as needed. But more importantly, most of what we talk about in these meetings are also discussed or come from our technical group meetings. So it's really important that you have context about like what's happening in both areas. And then finally, in addition to the actual meetings, we sometimes discuss topics through email. So if there's something that comes up and we aren't able to wait until the next meeting before we need input, we'll just have a discussion through email. And as consultants, you'll be making recommendations to whatever the appropriate decision-making party is. So the CCS groups have what we call a decision matrix. So this just kind of helps guide us to like which group has the final say in a decision. As the advisory group, you will primarily be making recommendations to other groups, either to CCS staff. So for example, if there's no change to workflow, you'll make a recommendation to CCS staff, and then CCS staff will take that recommendation. If there's a decision that requires a change to workflow, but doesn't have like a staffing or financial impact, your recommendation will be taken to whatever the appropriate technical group is, circulation or interlibrary loan, and the wider group will then vote to accept or vote to reevaluate. And then finally, if there is a financial or staffing impact, if there is a wide policy change, or if this requires the addition of a new service, the advisor group will make a recommendation, and then it would get run through by the other groups, and then finally formally approved by governing board. I don't think most of the decisions we make in this group are kind of at this level, the workflow changes that we take to one of the technical groups. I don't think we've had anything that's formally had to go to governing board quite yet. And then this is what we are looking at in terms of meeting dates. So we will be meeting December, March, and June, second Friday of the month at 9:30. The December meeting 100% will be on Zoom. And then next month, the governance will kind of talk about like what does 2022 look like in terms of where and how we meet. So I have TBD down for the March and June dates. I don't know if they will be virtual or if they will be back in person again. So to be continued there. So that is just a very quick, in a nutshell, update on what the circulation advisory groups, or I'm sorry, what the circulation ILL advisory group does. Let me just stop sharing my screen here if I can figure out how to do that. Are there any questions at this time or anything that you wanted to clarify?
Are there dates for the technical?
Yes, those are, I'll email the group those dates after the meeting rather than just ask you to write them down. Let me make a note of that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, great. In that case, let's just jump right into our first topic. So the first thing on our agenda is talking about web reports. I've got web reports up here. Bear with me, I'm going to be sharing my screen on and off throughout the entire meeting. Okay. So as we said on the agenda, a number of web reports contain patron information. And this can vary between as simple as a patron barcode to more detailed information like a patron's name, their birth date, their address. With web reports, I'm sure many of you are very familiar with this. We not only have the current report, but then all of the reports also have archives too that will list any previous versions of the report. Some of these reports compile data from a specific calendar period. So for example, this monthly patron expiration date next month, each report in the archive and the current report is going to have a completely different set of data. Other reports kind of like regenerate information. So for example, let me find, I don't want to open any of these up right now because I don't want to have patron information displayed in our recording. But something like a items with the status of claims report. This just kind of like regenerates information day to day. So for example, if a claimed item is on today's report, and if it's not resolved today, that item will also appear on tomorrow's report. So for these, we can kind of say that the archive is outdated because the relevant data is really just housed in the current report. So what CCS wants to do with web reports, we want to align to better data retention policies. We don't want to retain any unnecessary identifying patron data. And there's two possibilities that we're looking at here. Excuse me. We're looking at either maintaining an archive, but stripping down patron information. So we'll take out, the name, take out the address, take out the barcode, and instead have the patron ID number as a way for staff to identify patrons if they need to reference the archive. Our second option is to remove the archive altogether for reports that contain patron information. And this can either be immediately or after, a set number of days. So maybe after 30 days, the report archive is cleared out. In the agenda, I did include a list of reports that would be impacted here to hopefully give you an idea of how this could potentially impact workflow. So what we wanted to do, we wanted to see how the group feels about either option. We're really interested to know how either option could potentially impact your workflow or your library's reporting needs, or even maybe working with patrons for some of these. So with that, I guess my first question I wanted to pose to the group: how do you find yourself referring to the archives at any point?
Well,
I see a couple head shakes. Donna, yes.
Yeah, okay, so I mostly use web reports for, to go back in history on an item to see, if somebody checked it in, but it came back as a problem. Once you check it in, then you lose your history from the person before. So I use web reports for that, and I also use web reports for like, because we do Prospect Heights cards too, and they do ours. I had Bob do where I can get a report every month of which ones they created for us, Indian Trails cards, and they can get a report. So will that be affected, either one of those? By taking off all the information?
Oh, that would be, yeah, that would be a question then. Is that a report that you would like download and save locally? Or is that a report that you would go back into like web reports and access the archive?
Yeah, I would go into web reports and access it to get, unless there's a way to do it in Simply reports. But that, again, is this gonna affect Simply reports as well?
No, this will not impact Simply reports. This is just what's posted to web reports.
Okay.
Nico,
Yeah.
forgive me but can I just need a little clarification. When you say strip out the patron data, it strips out all of the patron data? I mean, is there still a barcode?
We would include the patron ID.
Just the patron ID? And can we access the patron record using the patron ID if we need to?
Yes, and that would actually be a more stable way of accessing the patron record than the barcode. Because if the patron comes in to replace their card,
Yeah,
the patron ID stays consistent.
okay.
Okay.
Diego,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
thank you. I'm trying to do the space bar and failing clearly. If we do remove the archive, does that also mean that the patron data will be stripped out of the existing one, or will that stay the same?
That will stay the same. Donna, did you have?
Yeah, I'm just about the patron ID. So if you enter the patron ID, the patron information comes up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so in Leap, when you use the patron, or I'm sorry, when you use the find tool to search for a patron, you can tell it to search for like the patron ID or basically the control number.
Okay.
And that's how you would connect with the patron information.
Okay. Is there a reason why they want to do this?
We went to take better steps to, I guess, better data retention policy, like practices. So we don't want to maintain a lot of patron information if it's not needed, basically.
Okay.
Well, from my perspective, as long as the patron information can be accessed if needed by the patron ID, I don't see any reason to maintain it in the archive. That's my perspective.
I would agree, because it doesn't seem like we're actually losing out on anything.
Same.
Okay.
So you feel maintaining the archive, but strip the patron data, except for the ID. Yeah, I would think that's a good way to go myself.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree as well. How long are we how long does the archive go back? Would it go back?
So at this time, the archive goes back quite a bit. I'm have the claims archive up, and it goes back through September of 2019. So there's
Okay.
about 2 years worth of archives there.
Okay.
Okay, so it sounds like the group is generally in favor of maintaining the archive, but would be comfortable stripping down the patron information to just the ID. Okay. I'm just taking down some notes. And like it says on the agenda for this one, it's just kind of a discussion we're starting to have. So with the group's opinion, I think it will help guide any decisions. But whatever we decide here is not set in stone yet. So I'm sure we'll need to talk to other groups too, just on this. Let me just see if there was anything else I wanted to ask you about. Okay. I think if everyone is kind of comfortable with that opinion at this point, we'll go ahead and move on then. Cool. So the next thing on the agenda was just some additions to the circulation manual. If you were at the last circulation technical group meeting, we had a brief discussion on practices for users who were entitled to multiple cards in the database, which not only includes like multiple property owners, but also staff cards. At this time, our circulation manual does not reference these kinds of situations. So we wanted to draft something up just so that there was, I think, something codified for staff. So there's two, let me share my screen again. There are two sections that we will add. One is specifically on users with multiple library cards. So Illinois statute says that anyone who owns or rents within the library's taxpaying service area is entitled to a card. And Illinois statute does not prohibit a user from having multiple cards if they pay taxes or rent to multiple service areas. So what I wanted to do with this section is just kind of clarify. I definitely wanted to reference the Illinois statute so staff would have easy access to that section. And also clarify that it's not a violation for users who are covered by the statute to have multiple cards in our database. I also wanted to recognize that there may be local practices or policies at your library that can impact this. So for example, it did come up at the meeting that at least one library has it in their local policy that they'll only issue like one household card to non-resident taxpayers. However, what I wanted to avoid with this section is using the manual to call out like specific scenarios. I didn't want to start addressing specifics that like then may cause confusion because it might stand in opposition to a local policy. So want to keep things like, I guess, general enough so that staff understand that they aren't in violation of anything issuing a second card to someone who might live within their district, but also didn't want to like cause any contradictions with the local practice. So with that, here's the draft. I just wanted to see what you thought about it, if there was anything that can be clarified, taken out, added. What are your thoughts?
I think it's pretty straightforward. And like you said, it doesn't get into nitty gritty for specific examples.
Yeah, I agree with Carrie.
Yeah, I think it gives all the necessary information without going too overboard.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree as well. I think it looks good. However, a patron could necessarily have more than 2 library cards, right? Even though it says 2.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. If we have someone who owns property in like 3 different library districts, then 3 different
Yeah.
library cards.
Sounds good.
Okay.
So do you think maybe you should change that word to multiple?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of leaning towards too, maybe.
Yeah. Multiple libraries.
Or 2 or more, you could say.
Yeah. Something
Oh yeah, that's good. All of that, 2 or more.
Then I think it's repeated in the next paragraph.
Oh, thank you. Or more home library cards. Okay, thank you. Thanks for taking a look at that section. The second section is on the practice of issuing staff library cards. And I apologize, I had received a comment this morning about addressing overdue fines. So right before the meeting, I kind of added a little more language here that I highlighted in red. So for the staff card section, wanted to outline practices for staff personal use library cards. And again, the tricky thing here is that libraries have different practices. So some libraries say that their staff cards are local use only. You know, if you take that card to another library, that staff member will be blocked. So some libraries have local use only staff cards. You can only use it to check out at your place of employment. You know, and essentially the expectation is that the staff would then use like their personal card to check out at a different library. One of the questions that prompted this section is that if the user works at their home library, you can't turn their resident card into a staff card, and then their home card essentially would be blocked if they go to other libraries. However, you may still want your employee to have access to like whatever staff perks may be available with that exempt card. So what this section wants to do is give allowances for issuing a separate staff card for an employee in addition to their home library card. I think before, when more CCS libraries charged overdue fines, I think it was the whole like staff perk thing definitely came into play a little more, because I think pretty much all libraries allowed their staff cards to be exempt from fines. Now that more and more libraries are fine free, whatever perks come with an exempt card, maybe like smaller and smaller and smaller. So, you know, it's not so much the case anymore. But since we do still have some libraries that charges fines, I did receive a suggestion to add just a comment in here that fines are set by the transaction library. So if staff do belong to a library that allows their exempt card to be taken to other locations, they will be subject to overdue fines if checking out at a fine library. So that was a last minute addition to the section. So I'll give you a minute to kind of look this over and then see if there's any changes or adjustments that you would suggest. And I'm just actually, let me zoom in a little bit just to hopefully make it kind of easier to read.
I'm fine with the content, but libraries may dictate if the exempt cards are to be local use only.
Thank you.
Yeah, it looks good to me.
Me too.
Yep, me too.
Me too. I just have a question, Miyako. Do you have, is it anywhere written where, or a list of who, what libraries have certain rules, like for the local use only?
Not centrally. It
okay.
would be something that we could reference looking at like the circulation tables on the back end, but it's not something that we have.
Okay,
written
I
up.
was just curious if we had, if there was a list so that we all know which libraries, you know. because I just found this out a couple of months ago about the staff card. So that it's local use only here. And that would explain why one of my staff couldn't check out at another library. And he was all upset because it was blocked and couldn't figure out why. Well, that
Yeah.
explains why he was using his staff card. So,
Yeah, Donna, we had something similar, but as the library, not with the patron. And I didn't realize that libraries could dictate local policy for that. And so it was just like, oh, yeah, they can check out here. So I'm curious how many just staff members are aware that they might be working at a library that has local use
Right,
blocks on it.
exactly.
Yeah.
I didn't know it existed, so.
yeah, that's what I mean. We didn't, you know.
Yeah, I
just
did
found
not
that
know
out.
So to clarify that, Mieko, for example, Donna at Indian Trails, I have used my Prospect Heights staff card at Indian Trails with no problem.
Mhm.
But is what she's saying is that their staff members cannot use their staff cards at other libraries, but they're
Yeah.
okay with other libraries using their.
Basically, it's up to the staff's library, so essentially the staff home library,
Okay,
on whether the card has reciprocal borrowing privileges or not.
okay. So I
I'd be
need to hunt
curious.
down who decided that. Basically, so we can, you know, and they can let the whole staff know, you know.
And I am curious as to why that became a thing, but I know that's not the purpose of that, but
No, it's
it
okay.
is,
It's a valid
it's,
discussion.
yeah.
I will say I don't have any memories from Cersei Dynex. So I can only tell you, like, when we started setting up for Polaris, libraries were able to say if the exempt cards could be used elsewhere or not. And off the top of my head, I don't know like the ratio of like which libraries give their staff cards reciprocal privileges or not.
It almost seems to me that it should be the reverse, that the, unless I'm misunderstanding it, that the libraries that, like, for example, Prospect Heights, we should say, we will not allow staff from other libraries to borrow from our library versus, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unless I'm misunderstanding it.
I could see that too. I think maybe it's also just like you're seeing it as a privilege that you have a staff card there because you may not live in that area, I guess. But just a quick question. So I guess I don't know if I'm not understanding the block either. So is it just that they're blocked from checking out, or once they check out, then a block is added?
It would be like if like any other block, basically when they come up to the circ desk and staff like do that first checkout and then the blocks appear.
Okay.
That's when you would see, I forgot what the message was.
Is
But
it kind of like,
essentially-
oh, sorry. Is it kind of like the Chicago patrons that like they're with us?
Right.
Okay.
They would have like borrower does not have privileges here, some kind of
Okay.
message like that.
Okay.
Basically,
Okay.
the circulation limit is input as 0 if the
Okay.
user does not have reciprocal borrowing privileges.
Okay.
And
Thank
Mieko, that information is located in those tables.
Mhm.
Okay.
So for this one, okay. So this is what I'm thinking for this one now. So the actual like governing board policies that that the CCS libraries follow, there's nothing in the actual policies that address staff library card use. So maybe for now, I will propose, adding in this users with multiple cards section to the CIRC manual, but putting a pause on the staff library cards section. And I can talk with our administration here to see if this is something that should be addressed by governing board and maybe see if an official policy would be better that all libraries follow.
Yeah,
Think about that.
yeah, because I'm a little confused because, you know, like our youth services and our adult services, and the selectors, you know, they want to borrow from other libraries to see if they want the book here too, or the item here. But if they're using their staff card, the way it's set up right now, they cannot do that. So I'm wondering what card they're using to get the, you know, for the rails and stuff, you know, what card they're using to do this, you know?
And that's okay. So what this section is addressing is reciprocal barring. So like when a person physically goes to another library to check out items. This does not impact inter-CCS lending at all. So if you have a staff card that is a local use only, you can 100% request to have things sent to your location to check out.
Oh, okay.
Nico, I'm sorry, can you say again, where do you, I'm not even sure if we're local. I mean, I have no
Sure.
idea where we are.
No, don't worry. Okay, so there's a couple places in web reports. Actually, ignore me. Let me think about where libraries can find this information about their own cards. I mean, yeah, if it's not in like your own like library employee handbook, let me see figure out where in like web reports that libraries can get this information.
Right, and how would you, like I assume in patron registration, when we're registering a new staff card, there would be somewhere in there we're clicking on or unchecking a box that says something. I don't.
Yeah.
No, so actually, we're gonna do a little deep dive, guys. Okay, so let me show you what the back end tables look like. I'm going to I'll just open up some displays. So each branch location has a number of policy tables, and this all kind of dictates like what happens when you come to check things out or do a certain thing. And so for each library, basically each library has a table entry for every single patron code. And we're going to use Algonquin exempt for this one. So Algonquin exempt, that is a local use only. So at every other library, they're going to have a total item limit of 0. And that's kind of what it looks like on the back end. So it's all based on the patron code and how it's set up. And it's set up, values were taken in when like libraries were initially moving to Polaris. You know, we had the library submitted their values, and then they could always, I don't know how common this has been in the past couple of years, but a library could always send us a ticket saying like, I want to change a value, and then we would apply that value basically to every location in the database. I think that may have just confused things more.
No,
I
I think
just-
that makes sense. I'm just trying to understand. So within CCS, if I'm using my staff card and let's say we are local use only, I can get an item from Displays and it'll come here and it's fine. But if I physically go to Displays and they have that policy, I would not be able to check out with my staff card. But if I'm going outside CCS, I still would be able to check out with my staff card because that library wouldn't have those codes, right? They would just be calling us to verify registration.
Right. Right. So like anything outside of CCS, that would probably be like your, I guess, whatever your own. So let me just stop sharing for a second so I can see it right. So anything outside of CCS would be like, basically staff would just want to follow their own local practices. So, you know, essentially, I think what what these tables are assuming and what the setup is assuming is that these practices are established in your library's staff handbook. So hopefully there shouldn't be any surprises, but there definitely are from what people have been saying. So I think that's kind of why maybe I want to just table this section for now and see if this is something that that we need like governing board or a different group to address.
Okay.
Does that sound fair? Yeah, okay. Oh, thanks.
It might be easier if we all on the same page.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Anne. So web report players policies, there's a tab, patron checkout limits, and it should like list, it pulls out the cards that don't fall under like the most general circulation policies. Okay, so with that, share my screen again. Okay, so this is under, so I did write down a motion, and let's amend this motion to so, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Instead of motion to recommend both sections, let's do a motion to recommend just the first one, users with multiple library cards. And then we're going to table this part. So may I have a motion to recommend the approval of the drafted segment, users with multiple library cards?
I move to recommend the drafted segment for users with multiple library cards.
Thank you. And do I have a second?
I'll second.
Is that Carrie?
Lori.
Lori,
Sorry.
no, I don't know if you can see when I share my screen, like half of the they're halfway off the screen. Okay, and all in favor, raise your hand or just say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? I'll take that as the no. Okay, so at the next circulation technical group, we will bring the section users with multiple library cards for formal approval, and then we'll add it to the circulation manual. We will table staff library cards, and I will check in with administration here to see if this is, to see what our best next move would be for this one. So we'll pause on that discussion. Okay. Moving right along to the next one. Is on ILL library data standards. So we've got some pending questions. Excuse me. Pending questions from the last month's interlibrary loan technical group meeting. So I did include some screenshots and just kind of like examples for the different potential data entry standards or changes we're looking at. So we have 3 that we want to explore, 3 that came up, and let me scroll down here. So backing up for a second, so these are standards for library patron accounts. So these are those accounts of that either, well, share libraries use. Share is going away. It's basically a service Rails supports that allows a library, so like someone from Naperville Public Library, or I'm sorry, like the interlibrary loan coordinator from Naperville Public Library can log into our catalog directly and place a hold instead of going through like OCLC or using the that ALA request form and emailing or faxing it over. The other way these accounts are used, interlibrary loan staff who are sending out items from their library to outside libraries for like a world share request. Some libraries will check their items out to these library accounts instead of like an in-house account. So we do have some existing data entry standards. However, there were a few elements that have not yet been addressed that came up. So the first thing that we had a question on was the entry of the 3-letter library code. So right now, each ILL library entry does have either their Rails code or their OCLC code in their name, just to make it easier for staff to identify the library or fill out paperwork when sending items away. So there were questions on whether it's best practice to use parentheses with these 3-letter codes or not to use parentheses. One thing to note, parentheses do not impact searching in LEAP. So staff can either search with or without parentheses. They will receive the same results, no matter how it's entered in the record. So this would purely be for maybe just visual preference or just kind of having your mind connect to like what this 3-letter code is. So turning it over to the group. What are your thoughts on using parentheses or not using parentheses?
Parentheses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I personally
parentheses.
like parentheses. It's better
Uh-huh.
that way.
Otherwise, like if you look at the KRU, it looks like the name of the library.
Right.
You know,
It creates a separation when there's parentheses.
Parentheses all the way.
Cool.
I agree with parentheses. I do have a question. Is there a reason the code is before and not after the name? Just out of curiosity.
it's a good one.
The data standards were that the code is entered as the first name. Let me scroll down and see if there is. Yeah, the code is entered as the first name. It pops up first. I don't know if there's a specific reason why it's the first name field and not the last name field.
Okay.
I actually like it being at the front. When I'm filling out the form, that's kind of like what I look at. Stands out to me more when it's at the front. But I don't know if that's why it's at the front.
That makes sense. That makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense.
I like it too.
Okay, so we are overwhelmingly in favor of using parentheses. That was an easy one. Let's move down to number 2. Name entry. So a question came up about like what happens when a library has a really long name. And I think this was prompted because the Brookfield Public Library recently changed their name to Linda Sokol Francis Brookfield Library. It doesn't all fit on a single field. Yeah. So, we had some like really important comments in the meeting about how it's important to have that full name display. So I think right away, the preference would be to not abbreviate the name. I totally agree with that. I think for searching and locating the name, it's very important to have the full name there. So what I am proposing is that staff use, if it's a really long name, staff make use of both the middle name field and the last name field to kind of divide up the library so that the entire thing still displays when you're looking at a record. This university libraries kind of already fall into this pattern. So our standards for university libraries is that the university name is used in one field and then the library name is used in the other field. So hopefully this won't be too much of like too different, I guess, for data entry. And the nice thing is that when searching, both as I indicated here, both the middle name field and the last name field are indexed both separately and together. So this means that when you're searching, you can just search the middle name, you can just search the last name, you can search the middle name and last name together. So as long as the search name segment is sequential, staff will be able to pull up the library. The only hard part is that staff will, every library is going to be different. So you might just need to use like individual judgment when determining how best to divide up the name, creating and modifying account. So what do you think about this for the long library names?
I like it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, as someone who works with these libraries every day, I think that's great, Mieka, what you proposed. It makes
Okay.
searching easy. It's good stuff.
Cool. Hopefully we won't have too many names with this long of or too many libraries with this long of a name.
What is the character limit per?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
I wonder if, let me see if I can like count that out later.
Yeah, we have a senior center here, new in Wheeling, and it's called the Landings on Dundee of Wheeling or something. And we were like, okay, how are we going to enter this so that it looks right and we can search for it? We had to play around with it to get it right, but
I think it's
But
32 characters per
32
first and last.
Okay.
So if it's
Thank
more
you.
than 64, well, or I guess it's more than that, 96, whatever that math is, then we're in trouble.
So based off of the example, I would assume that the best practice would be, I mean, this one's easy, obviously, because you can add, so last name should be like the Brookfield Public Library, and then the middle name should be whatever they decided to put in front. That's the best practice, right?
Right. I think that would make logically the most sense in terms
Yep.
of searching too.
Yeah, I think this is a great workaround.
Okay, cool. Okay, fantastic. So we will propose this, including the entire name, just dividing it up. Okay, and then the third question that came up is about the address type label. So the address, for address entry, each address field includes an address type label. So this can be, I've got Polaris or Leap up here. So let me just kind of show you what the different labels look like. I'm just going to scroll down to the address section. So you can have, it defaults to home. You can also select work, school, and then there's some weird other ones there. Where am I at? So a question came up about like what label, or should we have a label standard for these ILL library accounts? So the thing with this one, this field, it's not searchable in Leap. It's not available as any kind of like output option or filter option when running a report in Simply Reports. Additionally, I did double check with Bob. There are no web reports that this field impacts. So it seems like there would be no, I guess, no impact to staff and to the record based on what type of address they have. So just kind of like checking out some numbers here in terms of these ILL library accounts, the vast majority currently use an address label of home. Some other ones have some like labels of work, school, other. So question, should this field be standardized, or should we just say staff can continue to do what they want with it?
Define standardized.
So thanks, Brandon. So in terms of standardized, we would tell staff that they have to use a certain label.
It's hard to feel the push to make it standardized if it truly doesn't affect workflow, but I feel like the easiest thing would be just to make it home if we do standardize it, because that's the default setting anyway.
I
Right,
agree.
yeah, and they would just
Agree.
take their whatever address is home, so.
I think generally, because it's a default, we don't touch it. I only remember one time in my years in ILL, a staff member who was new questioned it. And I was thinking, well, let's go try something else just for fun. But generally, we don't even, we ignore it. It's use the default and move on. It just makes it easier than taking time to think about it. So I don't know that it matters if we standardize it or just.
If
Yeah,
something is,
yeah. I don't know, we have some business accounts and I don't make in the business, I make the business cards, so I have never changed it. I've always left it as home. I never put it as work or anything. I never changed it.
I made one of those 16 work ILL cards before I realized that it doesn't affect anything. So I wonder if the standardization can just say, you don't need to change this. Like, you don't even have to make it say home.
Yeah, if you're training a new person, it's easier just to don't worry about it. It'll default, use the default, don't touch it.
Yeah, if it doesn't impact anything, I don't think it's too important.
So then in our instructions for entering one of these ILL library accounts, we can just say address, leave address type as home.
Yes, yeah, that sounds good.
Yes.
Okay. It's easy in that case. So we've got, I think that answers for all three of these questions. And what we'll do then, we'll take the recommendations to the next interlibrary loan technical group meeting, just for the group to approve, and then we will like make it formal in the documentation. So with that, may I please have a motion to recommend the pending data entry standards?
I motion that we, what am I doing? Recommend the pending data entry standards for ILL.
So
I second it.
Donna seconds. Thank you. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
And any opposed? Okay. So how about just a 5-minute stretch break before we move on to the next, the big section of the agenda. So I'm gonna stop I'm just gonna pause the recording. Okay. Let's move on then to our segment on claims discussion. So I do share my PowerPoint for this one, so we can kind of go through some background information. Oh boy. Is it? There we go. Okay, so we have several pending questions about claims from the July Circulation Technical Group meeting. So we are soliciting input from our advisory group on claimed items. So some background where these questions came from. There's several ways library practices differ in regards to claims. So one of this is the point at which an item is claimed. Some libraries will claim an item right away when a patron says they think they returned it. It's kind of like a good faith effort, and then they kind of progress through their shelf checks. Other libraries will claim an item as a last resort. So they've completed their self checks and they know they're not going to hold their patron responsible for the item. So again, because of these two different practices, I'm sorry if this is in the way, libraries may or may not hold a patron accountable as for a claimed item. So some libraries may still opt to mark a claimed item as lost and bill the patron for the claim. Other libraries at that point an item is claimed will say we are not holding our patron responsible anymore. Some other things is that a claim will remain on a patron's record until the library resolves the claim. When an item is claimed, it is visible by staff in Polaris. It is not visible to the patron when looking at their account online. We currently do not have standard practice for when a claimed item should be removed from the patron's record. And as a result, some claims are left on patrons' records for a significant period of time. I think in the agenda I include the stat, as of August 24th of this year, 36% of active claims have been in the claim status for 2 years or more. So one of the pending questions that came from the tech group discussion on claims was, when should a library remove the item from a patron's record? So the complication with this, again, due to the differing practices on when an item is claimed, some libraries may not be ready to remove a claimed item from a patron's record at the same time. However, we still want these items to be resolved within a reasonable period of time so that the patron does not have outstanding claims on their records. And just in terms of how this can affect the patron, a patron can have up to 5 active claims before their card is blocked. So our first topic of discussion around this is, at what point should a claimed item be removed from the patron's record? How long should we allow a claim to remain active? And we don't need a magical number for this. If we can kind of determine like a reasonable range, a minimum amount of time or maximum amount of time, hopefully, I think the hope with this is that it would just be able to give libraries some guidance as to how to handle these claims so that they're not just kind of like lingering on a patron's record for over a year. So before we really jump into discussion, I just kind of want to give some numbers that might give some context. So this first set of numbers here are the age of active claims. And this is a snapshot of data from August 24th. So as of August 24th, there were just over 1,900 items in the database that had a status of claim. And this is a breakdown of when the items were claimed. So the majority of them were claimed this year in 2021, but we do have a decent number that have been claimed in 2020, 2019, and then a pretty big chunk that's been claimed 2018 or earlier. I also tried to get some data on items that were claimed and resolved. So Bob was able to help me run some numbers on items that were resolved. So either they were recovered and checked in, or they were billed to the patron between January of this year and July of this year. So as you can see, of items that were claimed and then resolved, 75% of these resolved claims were resolved within 34 days of becoming claimed. So one thing to keep in mind, these numbers don't reflect all claims. We did have some limitations on the data that we could grab, but these are numbers of items that have been claimed and resolved. So with that, I want to talk with the group about how long how long an item should stay as a claim before it is resolved. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And maybe to start with, just want to pose the question, how long do your libraries typically give patrons to resolve a claim?
So this is kind of a tough question, I guess. We don't resolve our claims like that.
we don't put things in claims unless we've exhausted all measures. We're one of the libraries that exhausts all measures first. And then we either make that choice of we're billing them, we're holding them accountable, or we're putting it in claims, which we're looking at as a write-off. We're just saying, we can't find it, you can't find it. We're gonna, kind of break even and call it claims. So we don't ever resolve it after that unless it suddenly turns up and we check it in. Otherwise, to my knowledge, those are staying in claims kind of indefinitely here. And what we use that, if we want to call it like archived claims that are still out there, is if this particular patron, that's one of the ways we use our judgment as to whether or not we're going to say, you know what, you have 3 on your account already. We may not know that they're from this year, last year, whatever, but it kind of establishes a pattern within the patron, if that makes sense. I don't know how long we don't need data from 5 years ago, obviously. I didn't know anyone was resolving those claims. I guess it's tough for me to say that. I'd be interested to hear what other people, if they're using our same like last resort thing, how do you resolve a claim? Do you run a report on claims? And then I'd be interested to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is at Indian Trails, we have someone that does it monthly. They do the claim status report, and they go through and look through the library to see if we can find the items. And then they mark them as lost. And usually we give like 14 days, roughly about 14 days, where we keep looking periodically for the item on our shelves to see if it didn't get checked in properly and it got shelved. And then after that, at the end of the month, we have someone that does just the claims status, and she looks for the books or the items, and then she puts them in lost if she still can't find them.
And are you putting those claims in claims? Like if I'm the patron and I walk up and I say, oh, I returned that last week, are you putting it in claims immediately?
No, it stays on their account. We only allow 1 claim return per patron. So, okay. They get 1 and then they get charged for anything after that.
Okay, so you're similar. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have for the lifetime of a card, you can have 5 claims. It's the way that we do it. I just wrote to my boss right now because I was curious if we do resolve, claimed return reports, because as far like, if I'm understanding correctly, you put something as claims returned. When I started 2 years ago, I had a different boss, so she might have told me something a little bit different, but somebody claims returned, we would check our shelves. If it's another library's material, we'd give them a call, have them take a look for it. If they didn't do it, but the patron is still insisting that they returned it, we would do the claim, which I was told, even if it's another library's material, it just gets eaten because they do the same thing. If it was our material, and then from there, I have no idea. And then my boss just said, unsure, but not likely. So I would assume that we didn't clear them, because how else would we know how many claims they've had on their card? Because I'm assuming if it does get resolved, then it disappears from the claims section on their account. No?
Not quite. So let me see if I can pull up a account here. One of my test patrons. So, do they have claims? This is close enough. Let me just share my screen real quick. So in terms of claims, there's 2 entries. There's the current claims. And so these are the active claims, the items that are have a circulation status of claim return, but they still have the an item, like the item record's still there. The item record hasn't been deleted. And then there's the total claims, which shows you how many claims this patron has made in their lifetime. So the
Excellent.
discussion is, I want to center the discussion more around like the current claims. And I think this question really came up because libraries are able to claim return items from the other libraries, is that some claims, some of their items were just kind of sitting as claims and then not getting like deleted. So there's like these years old item records that are kind of hanging around that the library wants to clean up, but can't really, I guess.
So Prospect Heights, kind of like you guys, Lori, we have, I'm just looking at our claims returned report. There's 9 items on it, and 8 out of the 9 of them were made by other libraries. And I did one of them, and I don't even recall why. Anyway, we give patrons 30 days. You know, we do all the shelf checks back and forth, and 95% of the time it resolves itself. So we don't go down that road. And I don't really know how to deal with these ones that were claimed returned by other libraries. So I don't have a very good answer for this.
I recall in that last meeting, they were expecting the owning library to like do shelf searches. I think by putting it in claims, they thought someone was looking at the report at the home library and then doing shelf searches, which I had never heard of. So we are certainly not doing that.
Yeah, here at Park Ridge, we have like a shelf check procedure, and we perform like at least 3 shelf checks, which take place, I would say, like takes about a week or 2 for it to be completed. And then circumstances, like if the patron is sure they returned it, then we do mark it as claims returned. I did try to ask Anastasia, like if there's a max amount that we like have on a patron account. She didn't say. And I did ask her too, like the amount of time it stays as claimed, and she said she doesn't really have an amount of time, and she just deletes it, I believe, but she doesn't have a specific amount of time for when she deletes it. But I think I kind of wrote down a number of like for maximum and minimum just to kind of get the discussion like going to on that end. But I was thinking like 6 months as a minimum and a year as a max.
Yeah, I have a question too, Mieko. We're under the impression that if all of a sudden, like we'll see in our patron account after so much time, and that you go to their history and it says they've been notified over and over again and they've been billed, because it automatically goes to billing. And I think when it goes to billing, it automatically makes it lost, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't understand how these claims can still be, if it goes to lost, you would think it would come out of the claims then.
So once an item becomes claims returned, that's the circulation status. It's a claims returned item. So it doesn't progress to loss. It just kind of stays in claim return until the library does something with it.
Okay, so anything that goes to loss is not a claim then. Okay.
I'm also in favor of the year as the max. That's what I've been doing just for us, because our current policy is once it's lost for a year, it goes to withdrawn. If it's been claimed, it's essentially been lost for a year. It's going to withdrawn just to get it off that patron's account as an active claim. So we didn't really have a minimum, just do the monthly report. If it's been there for a year, it gets reconciled in the sense that it's just gone. We just write it off. We don't even contact the owning library, because I've had that happen before where it's been claimed for a year and then they get charged for it. And the patron just thinks like, what is this? Like, I thought this was taken care of a year ago. So it's not frequent. That hasn't happened very often, but just, it's like, it's gone, it's done.
And Mieko, I have a question. How does one resolve the claims returned? I mean, just by checking it in?
There's two ways, and this is actually something we're going to talk about next.
Oh, okay. Well, we can wait.
But no,
if you want.
it's good to bring up. There's two ways you can resolve a claim return. One, you can just check the item in, and it takes it off as a claim. And then you can put the item in whatever circulation status you need to next, repair, missing, etc. Or in the patron's record, you can make the claim item mark it as lost. And then either hold the patron accountable for the cost of the item or waive the cost of the item.
I don't see how I could mark it as lost once it's in. I'm just looking at one of
Oh, sure.
ours that is it's claimed returned, but it's no longer on the patron's account. How would I even do that?
Can you click on it, Anne? The little box
Click
on
on
the
the
left.
click on the item.
Click on the box on the left right next to the barcode, and then the declare loss button should be active.
Click on, oh, that box there.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
still in the
Oh, I
patron's
got
account.
it. Okay, thank you.
Let me making a claim on my test card right now. And then I can show, I can demo for everyone. Go share my screen. Okay. So I've got a claim here. I've got an active claim, and then let's say if I didn't want to hold the patron accountable, I can click declare lost, and then just waive the charges. Or if I wanted to hold the patron accountable, I could then charge the patron for the charges.
That is an expensive Blu-ray.
I think I'd really look for it. Yeah, we always tell members too, we always give them, if it's our item, we'll extend the overdue so that it gives them time to look again at home, but doesn't block their account. But look, that way, look for it first, because if you pay for it and it turns up, we prefer not to refund, it's automatically their item then, and then we mark it withdrawn so that they know to order another one. So
let me ask this, and this is probably more a question for Wineka and Ela. So if the patron, if you make a claim for the patron, and let's say it's been a year, so that claim is on their list of lost claimed items for a year. And at that year, if that item record is, if we wanted to delete that item record, right? So let's say we clear out that claim, we can delete the item record. So that lost item is, or that claim, I'm sorry, that claim item is no longer listed under the patron's tab of lost and claims. Would that interfere in any way with how you work with patrons?
I don't think so. Most of the people when we have patrons that want us to put something in claims, it's typically because their account is blocked and they want it resolved immediately, which we won't do. Actually, we just tell them use your spouse's card, your children's card. We'll find another way around it. So, we don't use it very often. So, I really don't think it would matter. We don't have that many that it would cause that great a problem one way or the other, I don't believe.
I don't think it would matter too much. We generally do the what was said earlier of if it's somebody else, if it's another library's material, we'll renew it for them have them take a look. We take a look. We will also call the library that it, belongs to and see if they can do a shelf check. But, and then, yeah, so generally after that is done, that's when we'll make the claim. So it's depending, sometimes you can also give the option of, because there's some people that are just like, I'll just pay for the material, even though I really believe that I returned it. But we do have those few that are just like, I definitely know that I returned this. So at that point, you just, yeah, it gets marked as claimed. So I don't think it would impact too much.
Okay. So opening this up to the wider group, would it impact your libraries negatively or working with your patrons negatively if we had a standard that if an item has been in claim status for 1 year, it's time to clean it out. It's not, that thing's not coming back. It's time to clean out that record.
That wouldn't affect like our monthly, when we go through monthly then. Because we clear them out every month. Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So you're like Indian Trails, your workflow might be that you're taking care of these things, like you said, monthly basis. This probably be a workflow adapted for the libraries that don't already have something established.
It would not have any impact on us.
I don't think it would have any impact on us either.
From my conversations with Lynn, she deals with this more, I think it would be fine for us too.
Okay. Let's start with that. I don't know, like just kind of based off the discussion here, I don't know then in terms of like the minimum length of time a claim should stay in the database. I don't know how effective it would be to have that kind of recommendation. So I think at this time I might amend the agenda recommendation. Let me just share. I'm sorry. Let me share my screen again. I think I might amend this recommendation to take away, oh boy, the minimum, and for now, just make the motion to recommend a maximum length of time.
Mieko, what would be the point of a minimum? I'm just trying to.
I think it would be in case there are any libraries that like claim it right away and then just like want to resolve it right away without giving the patron time, but it doesn't sound like that is a factor. It sounds like libraries already kind of have a process in place.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't know quite where we're going to take this discussion next. If this needs to go to like a catalogers group or a database management group before like establishing like, yes, we want this to be our standard. But I think it's good to have kind of an idea in place to start with. So if the group is comfortable with that 1 year maximum length of time, before we make a motion, was there any other discussion around a maximum length of time for claimed items?
I do have a quick question. The reports, so like lost item reports slash claim. So that if found, that would obviously take care of that problem. But after, I think it's like what, three-ish attempts to look for something, it's usually officially declared as gone. Is 1 year too long?
So this
Like,
is, I think this was my intent with this recommendation, is that if a library wants to resolve the claim before the year, they totally can. It would just be for if the library doesn't already have an established workflow.
For us, I was just using a year because there was no precedent set. And it's like, this is an easy way to just do it because it aligns with the loss. But if it got shortened, I mean, as your numbers on the slideshow pointed out, 75% are found within like 34 days. We just live in a community where a lot of the items that get marked to lost still end up getting returned. It's just lots of families, lots of kids. It's a transient community. So it's like, I'll give them a chance. I'd still rather have the item back than not. But if it gets shortened, that's no big deal.
Nika, didn't it used to be a year before? Didn't they wipe every year before?
I don't know what happened. If we're talking about Cersei Dynex, I don't know what happened at Cersei Dynex.
I feel like it did, or that used to be policy or something.
Okay.
That rings a bell for me. I don't.
So a year sounds good then if it's kind of like a familiar pattern. And then the library can definitely clear out these claims before a year if they wanted to. I'll have to check on the Cersei Dynex. I have no memory of Cersei Dynex. It's terrible, terrible.
I'm just extending this. Is there any, I know we were talking about no minimum, but is there value in making the minimum a month for libraries that might not be represented here, since it seems like a bunch of them do get returned around the 30-day mark, or do we still just want to leave it at a maximum?
It's a good question. What does the group think about that? So this would be for like libraries who clear their claims out right away. Leave your claim on the patron's account for a minimum of 1 month.
I think that sounds reasonable.
I don't know. I'm not responsible for that, so I would have to find out from the person that does it. So.
And maybe this is a silly question, but those libraries are just looking at their own items, right? Not the ones they've claimed for other libraries.
It could be both.
Where do you
Well,
look at those other items that you've claimed? Is that a report you can look at? It is.
There's a claims returned report on.
I'm sharing for a second. Dig around.
And what I think it's under items.
Because I know you can look at your items that have been claimed, but I honestly didn't know.
Oh,
if
of
you could look
other
at-
libraries.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
yeah.
I see. Well, since I never do it,
You're like,
there's something out there.
I'm just opening up one of these reports here. Actually, maybe I should have. I might have to dig around some more to see if that information is somewhere or if we can add it into the claim report.
I feel like maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I feel like it should be up to the owning library to make that decision ultimately, if it's going to be marked lost or,
I couldn't think of value in having this information. It was more general curiosity to
Mm.
see, but because maybe it would be reflective that a library is making too many claims on everything, and then it's like, oh, we need to get our stuff together. But no,
well, I think that's a good point, though. I mean, some of the claims on that list, I was just looking at, they were, well, I was just frustrated because they were teachers that they were bags of books, you know, and they returned all 95 of the others, but yet they were allowed to have the claims returned. So instead of looking.
Just thinking here for a second. Okay. So with the group, would the group feel comfortable then making a recommendation to say an active claim should remain on a patron's card for a minimum of 1 month, no longer than 1 year? Or would you feel more comfortable establishing a minimum or establishing a maximum? And again, at this point, I don't know what's going to happen with this recommendation. It's more just kind of establishing a baseline point with which to move the discussion forward.
I think for a minimum of 1 month and up to a year, because that gives them a chance to search for it and check it in if they find it, and it gives the member a chance to look for it.
I agree.
Agreed.
I agree as well.
As well.
I agree.
In that case, I think I will. I know what I just did. I X'd out the minimum, but I'm gonna share my screen. I'm gonna keep that in. And then could I have a motion to recommend a minimum of 1 month, maximum length of 1 year for a claim to remain on a patron's record?
I motion to recommend a minimum of 1 month and a maximum of 1 year for an item claimed return on a patron's record. Or any item claim return or claim never had, right? Because it's both claims on this, isn't it, Viego?
Exactly.
Okay, yes,
Exactly.
then claimed item.
I'll second.
And seconds. Okay. All in favor?
I
I
Aye.
see hands.
Aye.
Great.
I
I don't think there was anyone for opposed then. Okay, so I will take this recommendation. I will keep the group updated via email on what we think whatever next steps for this discussion should be. So stay tuned for that. Okay, the next point of discussion, let me go down here, involves removing a claimed item. And the keywords here are without billing the patron. So there's 2 methods for removing a claimed item without billing the patron. The first method is to mark the item as lost and then waive the charges, as we demonstrated with that $1,000 Blu-ray. The second method is to check the item in, so it's removed from the patron's record, and then change the item status to missing. And there's a couple, I guess, pros and cons for each method. So with the first method, when you're marking the item as lost and then waiving the charges, the item's already claimed, so the patron already has a lifetime claim count that will stay on the patron's record. The item's circulation status becomes lost, and the patron has a waived replacement cost on their record. So with this method, Since the item is considered lost and waived, that's reflected in a web report. So your selectors will have, I guess, possibly more of an indication that the status of this item is final, it's not coming back, and it can be replaced. Additionally, with this status or with this method, the patron has an entry in their transaction history that the library has waived a replacement cost. So if you ever refer to that transaction summary, and let me go back into my patron here. So if you ever go back in the transaction summary to see like what has patron done, you will see these a waive entry. With the second method, you check the item in to remove it from the patron's record, and then you change the item status to missing. So just like the other method, because this item was already claimed, the patron still has a lifetime claim count. The item circulation status is not lost. It's now missing as of the check-in date. And I think one of the cons for this method is that the patron doesn't have that waive charge entry for the item. So, you know, the staff aside from that lifetime claim, staff really won't have a visual about like what happened with this item or this charge. So the second question is, what would you say the recommended workflow would be to remove a claim item from a patron's record when not holding the patron responsible for the cost?
I have a question.
Yes.
For both scenarios, marking it as lost or marking it as missing, so you've done the claimed return, you've done the checks for all of them. When you do the lost and or missing, is it going to still show up on your lost or missing reports that you run every month?
Yes. So if we mark it as claimed, it will show up on the monthly, actually for both of them, they will show up in that monthly lost, missing, damaged report. That report does, so in that report, it does have a single page for missing items. It has a page for the lost items. And then there's a separate tab for items that are lost and either paid or waived.
Okay. All right, perfect. Thank you.
I also have a question, Miko. If we put it in lost and waive it, when we look in that history of the patron's account, will that claimed lost waive, does that look identical to an assumed lost waived?
I think it does look identical. Let me share my screen. Actually, we'll test with that. I'll test with that claims return that I made. Okay, so I'm not going to hold my patron responsible here. So I'm just going to declare this lost. We're going to waive it to minimize my screen here because I can't see anything. So, okay, now let me check my transaction summary. So here's my charge for that Blu-ray, and I can see, yeah, I can see that it was declared lost, but from this initial entry, there's no indication that it was claimed. Let me just pop into the properties here. Properties doesn't have a claimed entry. I think you would need to go into the item record history tab to see that it was claimed to lost.
I guess then on a follow-up, I can't recall, is there like a notes field or a message field where you could essentially go from claims? I guess what I'm asking is there a notes field on the lost? So when you put it in lost, you could say claims returned lost or something, just physically write it in.
Oh, yeah. Okay, let me set up another item here.
I hope Mieko proves me wrong. I don't think there is a way to put a note in when you're declaring something as lost, because I wanted that for a different reason before.
I think you're right. I think it's just missing. I think missing is the only one you can write a note in. Yeah.
If you manually waive it, if you go into the patron's account and select that item, there is the option to write a note, but if you're like checking it in and doing the pop-up that Mieko just had, you're out of luck.
Yeah, Carrie is correct. So again, if I just went in and did like the declare loss, like she said, like you saw before, there's no note. If I charged, let me refresh my screen here. Oh, I just waived it by accident. Darn it. If you charge the patron, and so it applies to the account page, then when you go to waive it, then you can add a note.
I guess that, yeah, that was my only thought, is that if I look at their history, I'm going to see a lot of wave, wave, wave. But I'm going to discount that anyway, because if they, we regularly, obviously, I think everybody does have people that bring things that are an assumed loss back, and we waive them all the time. So it'll look the same. So that I guess would be my only concern about putting it in lost and waiving it. Although, to be honest, I don't know that we'd ever look. We really don't have, I mean, we don't put very many things in claim. So I think for us, it wouldn't be a large problem either way.
Yeah.
I think for us, if we had somebody that was abusing it, we wouldn't look so much at the loss record just versus their total claim count and be like, no, you've burned us enough times.
Yeah, I think that's why we leave it. They only get one claim return.
So I guess another way then to frame this question is, do we need a recommended workflow for resolving a claim we're not holding the patron accountable for? Or is this something that the library can decide individually if they need or not?
I think the library should decide individually how they're doing it. Like I said, I don't have control over that, so it's.
I agree. I think it should be up to the individual library. And then I was just thinking too, I always associate missing with more like an item that's showing as available on shelf that we're going to mark it as missing. I think it would be better, or I think it would be better to mark it as lost when it's claimed.
That's what we do, Jasmine. That's why I'm kind of leaning that way.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point.
So I guess my question is, at what point after it's been claim returned, all that stuff, we mark it as lost, at what point would you guys repurchase that material? So, I mean, like, you go through all the steps, can't find it, nobody can find it, claim returned, all that, it's time to delete it or get it off the account. Is there any weight behind checking it in and marking it as withdrawn? It's like, we know when it's withdrawn, our selectors will then decide if we want to purchase the material again or not. With marking it as lost, that extends the time that we might wait to purchase it. So I guess just is the withdrawn aspect of it. I don't know if I'm throwing a wrench in the gear or not, but I was just curious as to the thoughts on that.
Yeah, we don't, at Indian Trails, circulation doesn't put anything in withdrawn. That's material services that will withdraw it. So
Same
the only
here.
thing we do is loss.
Oh, okay,
So,
We don't either.
okay.
So one thing I think, kind of going back to like Jasmine's suggestion here, is that if a library has an established practice, they can use that practice. But if they're looking for guidance, we can say this is our recommended workflow to mark something as lost.
That makes sense to me because I could use a little guidance. So I'm sure there are others.
yeah, that works, recommended.
I thought that's what the group was looking for. The CERC group was looking for some guidance. So I think that would be a good recommendation.
Any other questions or comments before we move into making a motion? In that case, may I, and you don't have to repeat the whole thing, you can just say I move. May I please have a motion to recommend, instead of saying standardize, we'll say motion to recommend workflow for removing a claimed item from the patron's record when not holding the patron responsible for a cost.
I move.
And
What-
moves.
I second.
Jasmine seconds. All in favor? It's okay to oppose, Brandon. I see you questioning there.
Yeah, I'll oppose. I think it's tricky with the different libraries have different ways of doing things. So I think it's hard to make like not a concrete, but even, yeah. So I'll oppose.
That's okay. And I think how I want to frame this then, I think how we want to frame this is that the library can follow their own practice, but if they need guidance, here's a recommendation.
Right.
Okay. Go ahead,
Then
please.
I don't oppose anymore.
Okay.
That covers all the bases, so we're good.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, it's good to clarify. Okay. I feel good about that one. And then the final thing I want to talk about in terms of claims, and I think this one is going to be like very minimal in terms of when it will come up. But the question to come up about, like, how do you claim an item that's already lost and billed to the patron? So again, there's two ways you can go about this. The first method would be like waive the loss charges. And the second method is to check the item in and check the item back out to the patron, and you mark it as claimed. So with the first method, like if the patron says, this item is billed to my account, I know I've returned it, I don't have it. The first thing the library could do is waive the charges, right? So the item status remains as lost, with lost and waived. Patron has waived replacement costs on their card. Downside of this is that there's no active claim on the patron's account and no count has been added to the patron's lifetime claims. The second method, when the patron has a billed item on their card, says, I know I returned this, I don't want to pay for it, the staff could instead check the item in, check the item back out to the patron, and then mark the item as claimed. In this case, the item status is updated to claimed. An active claim count is now in the patron's account, and the count will already be added to their lifetime claims. And then from this, the library can resolve the claim as per local procedure. So I think I'd prefer to go about this like we did the last one, where if a library has an established practice, I'm happy letting them follow that established practice. If the library needs guidance on what to do, they can use our recommendation. Okay. Stop sharing. So for these cases, when the library item has already been billed and the patron insists they returned it and wants to do a claim return, what do you think the best workflow would be?
Okay, what we do, we always check it in and then check it back out to the patron, is how Indian Trails does it.
Does the checking it back out, and then marking it as claims, does that take off the processing fee and overdue fee? I mean, not overdue, replacement?
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure.
I'm in favor of marking it as a claim, because then you can still have that record of the lifetime claims. Because then if you do method one, you're setting yourself up to having to write notes, check notes. When it's really a
Yeah.
claim, it's just an older claim.
Yeah, I agree. I think method one adds a little bit more work, and we do method two over here.
So you guys also check it in, check it back out and claim it.
Yes. Mhm.
I can't imagine we would use that very often, but if we did, that's the way we would do it as well. We'd make it so that we could follow the claim.
And I definitely think because of how our cards work with the 5 lifetime, we would need that claim aspect of it.
So does creating a recommended workflow of checking the item in, checking back out, and making it as claimed
Mhm.
seem like the preferred workflow?
So
Yeah.
this is only going to be used if it's already been charged to the patron.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other thoughts before we make the recommendation? So again, like last time, if a library has an established workflow, they can follow that. If they need guidance as to a recommended workflow, this would be the recommended workflow. And with that, may I have a motion to recommend this workflow for resolving I'm sorry. May I have a motion for recommending this workflow for claiming an item that's already been billed?
I'll
Motion to
move. I'll second.
Okay, so Carrie moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
I just
opposed?
said- Miyako, I have one
Yeah.
quick question. Okay,
Yes.
so are you saying billed by the system or billed by a collection agency?
Mm.
Billed by a system. Well, billed by a system.
Okay,
So figure this item's already been overdue
Okay.
45 days, moved into loss. In terms of that the patron's been sent to collection agency, I figure not all of our libraries participate in collections, so that
oh,
could be up
okay.
to the individual
Okay.
library.
Yeah, because I know we can't waive, yeah, we can't, there's no option to waive the collection fee. So, okay,
So I forgot if I asked, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay. How's everyone feeling?
I have one question though about, this is not on here, but how they, we found out, you know, because if you, for damaged items, it comes in and it's damaged and somebody accidentally checks it in, and then realizes it's damaged, you lose the previous history of who had it last. So you could go to Simply Reports and get that, but, so what we were doing is if it comes in, we look at it really good. If it is damaged, we don't put it in, we don't check it in. What we do is to change the status to damaged, we put it in the find tool, the barcode. That way it keeps that history. So I don't know about the rest of you, how you do the damage, or be able, if you have to go back to find the other person.
If you do
Previous-
accidentally, oh, sorry,
So,
go ahead.
sorry, I was gonna say the previous patron is, I'm a little confused because it is on there.
Yeah.
Right, but the one before that, so if the person that just returned it says they didn't do the damage, if you
Hmm.
check it in, you lose the one before them.
You have to strike before it's checked in, but
Right.
it's,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, so once you check it in, you lose the previous one before the current one.
Oh, I see.
So-
Yeah, we wouldn't hold that, if we missed it the first time, that's our bad. We wouldn't charge the previous patron unless it was somebody that just got it off the shelf, checked it in and hadn't even left and said, oh, this was like
Okay.
that we wouldn't even.
Oh, okay.
That's the same for us. We wouldn't. That's our fault.
Same.
Okay, you guys ready to move on to the last topic? This one is just a discussion, so nothing that needs to be decided. So I was hoping this would be kind of like a casual thing to end the meeting on. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. So the final thing, oh dear. The final thing on the agenda was to discuss lost and missing item retention. So one of the things that CCS is kind of like thinking about, we just kind of want to take a step back and see areas that we can like reevaluate and like potentially think of standardizing. And this time I wanted to check in with the group on lost and missing record retention. So in other words, how long item records that have a status of lost or a status of missing should remain in the database. And the big reason why we're kind of interested in talking about this is because if this is something we can standardize, this would allow CCS to take on some like centralized work in terms of deleting records instead of having it fall on the individual libraries to do. So wanted to just kind of get your thoughts on when we can start, like when we could potentially purge lost or purge missing item records from the database. I just kind of want to see, like, do you have any thoughts or opinions on how this might impact your day-to-day work or your work with patrons? So in terms of lost records, I think one of the big impacts staff would see in circulation is that if a lost item record is deleted, is like purged from the database, but the patron has not yet paid for it, what will happen? The charge will stay on the patron's account, but staff won't be able to like click into and open up the item record. Instead, they will just see this deleted message tacked on to the title. So the charge stays, but they don't have access to a full item record. Additionally, when an item record is deleted, staff will lose access to the item record history, either through the, obviously the item record history tab, or through Simply Reports. And CCS staff can query historical information at this time. So like if you did need to know like who the second or the third previous patron was, we could pull that up, but you would need to ask CCS for that information. And then just like with claims, we were able to get some data on like how long, so items that became lost and then were recovered, how long it took to recover those items. So as you can see here, again, we were able to look at a period of January through July of this year. And out of the 18,000 some items that became lost and then were recovered, 75% were recovered within 35 days. And kind of similarly with missing items, of the 8,000 some items that went missing and then were recovered, 75% of those were recovered within 46 days of becoming missing. So this is an area where I wanted to have some more data for you, because these numbers that I just showed you are only looking at items that were missing and then were recovered. What I don't have is data looking at all the items that were missing, so we can compare items that were recovered to not recovered. So I feel kind of bad I don't have the data I wanted to show you for this discussion today. And just like with lost items, you know, we just kind of want to see like, okay, well, how can removing missing item records from the database like impact staff workflow? So I've got some questions here about like just kind of getting a discussion going on, you know, if we did purge item records that were lost or item records that were missing, would that impact your day-to-day workflow in any way? Would that impact how you work with patrons? Or, you know, maybe after a certain point, maybe after a year or so, you don't need to see those missing records anymore. I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. I don't even know if I'm asking the right questions. Like this really is just the very start of starting to think about this. So I'm not even sure what questions to ask that would be helpful, or what information to give you that would be helpful. So that's kind of where I wanted to start the discussion today. So maybe to get things going, you know, do you work with like long lost item records or long lost missing records in any of your day-to-day work?
We do.
You do, okay.
Not often, but we will have a patron come back after a long period of time. Is it difficult? It can be, because I can't tell them, you check this out on March 1st, whatever. But honestly, if it's a year, you know, most of them are really long, and I don't know how to say this nicely, but it's like, you know, it's been a year, you've been, and I can pull up notices that we've sent you. I'm sorry you didn't get them or disregarded them. At this point, your option is pay for it. That's so, I mean, it would be nice if we had all the but when they're that old, I'm not sure it matters that much, you know. And just on the opposite side of that, just to speak of like how long, if there was a standard practice to eliminate those, you know, or put them in withdrawn or whatever, just remove those, put them in deleted. We've kind of been on both sides of that fence. So it's interesting, just things for people to think about. We previously took returns or took, what am I trying to say? We refunded items before. Mm-hmm. And so we wouldn't want them deleted quickly. We would want them to stay a long time, because we gave people, I can't remember, 3 months or 6 months or whatever it was to return an item. So we'd want a longer period. And now we will not take a return. I mean, we will not take a return once it's been paid for. So once it's paid for, it's yours. So we're fine with deleting it right away. So you know, that can be a little tricky, I think, with the, you know, with the time frames.
I agree with Lori on that.
To my knowledge, we don't delete anything with the status of lost. We let it roll to withdrawn. So if we were to make a standardized deletion of a lost item, that would essentially change our return window for patrons, because our hard stop, I mean, I know we are generous, but our hard stop is If it's been lost for a year, it's withdrawn. You've had more than enough time with it. It is gone. So if we did change at least the loss, we'd have to reevaluate what our return policy is, because I'm not in processing, so I don't know the steps that it takes to make an item record, but my mentality is if it's a deleted record and we receive it, that's just more work for other staff to recreate the record for an item that we had essentially written off anyway.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the only odd thing that we have here, different than Lori, is if somebody gets lost, they paid for it, they have 2 weeks. If they find it within that 2-week period, we'll refund. Other than that, it's that if you hit the 15-day mark, it's over.
Yeah, for us, it's 30 days. We have a 30-day mark. We refund them.
So it sounds like, oh, Anne, sorry, go ahead.
We don't take, we don't give refunds at all. So,
Neither does
but I do find it frustrating sometimes when I come across deleted items and I can't get any history on them. This happened yesterday. And there was a big charge on the patron's account. And of course, he didn't remember, but I couldn't do anything. I couldn't find out anything about it. So, and he left and didn't pay it. So hopefully he'll come back.
So it
I
sounds
agree
like,
with,
oh, sorry, Jackie, go ahead.
sorry,
please.
Diego. I agree with Ann. It doesn't happen that often, but occasionally it's a deleted item and you can't even tell them anything about it. It's a little frustrating sometimes, but not that often.
So it sounds like if we were to progress this discussion at all, we would definitely want to know library return policies to make sure that any kind of standardization does not then conflict with like how long they'll accept the items back. And we would also want to make sure that the discussion took into account a period of time for handling patron questions related to these lost items. How about missing items? If there was some kind of like centralized process for deleting missing item records after a year, and maybe this would be a question more for technical services staff or selectors. In terms of circulation in your workflows, I guess how often do you deal with anything that's like long-term missing?
So for me, I would love a standardized deletion for missing because I am also a selector. And I very recently found out that the rest of our selectors don't do anything with those missing items at all. There were no standardized practices for how to reconcile those. I forget who at CCS I asked, but it's like, do those get cleared out? And it's like, no. So we had missing stuff from like 2012. It's like, get that out of here. That's awful. So I just did a massive purge of everything to get it deleted. But I think it was mentioned earlier. I take missing as not necessarily a patron fault. It's gone. It was here and now it's running the pick list and we can't find it. So I would love a standardized time for missing.
Yeah, what we do is on the pick list, bringing up the pick list, what we do is after looking for it 3 or 4 times and we still don't find it on the shelf to, for a request, then we mark the item as missing. So, but about getting rid of them, I don't think that's circulation's call here to delete a missing item. That I think that belongs with the selector or the material services who orders them.
So having just undergone a renovation and a lot of books were moved by non-library staff, lots of things went missing. And I just had my staff do, I'm trying to keep them busy because there's nobody in the building. So I'm giving them long lists of missing, and I was amazed at how many things they found. So I was happy about that. But yeah, it would be nice that there was some standardization. It would help me decide at what point should I just say, this is gone.
Yeah.
And to that point, I think the standardized is generally very good, except for those instances like she just talked about. And, during the pandemic, Northfield wasn't open, but Winnetka was. So we moved a lot of the Northfield collection to Winnetka and integrated it in there. And then when Northfield opened, there was a lot of stuff still there, and then Winnetka stuff got over here and things were marked. And so I think the standardized is great, except for smaller instances that might come up.
So we definitely want at least a wide enough berth to allow some of these to kind of work themselves out.
Yeah.
And then probably also some kind of report or something staff can refer to that's like, hey, these are going to be, maybe these have been missing for 11 months and they're going to be automatically deleted next month. Check your shelves if you want something like that.
I think you're right. I think that's more, at least here, that's more material services. I do look at the missing report here. I have my staff go double check it, but I know material services does as well before they withdraw the items. So,
Yeah.
So it sounds like, and I totally agree with this, then if in terms of the discussions around a missing standardization, probably better addressed to database management or some kind of interdisciplinary group, so that public services staff can touch on it and material staff can touch on it. I'm trying to think what I want to ask about lost items. If the question about lost items was to progress further, would there be any certain data that you would want to see that would help form a recommendation? You don't have to answer this now if you don't have. I know one thing, like I said, I was hoping to have some more data. One thing I was hoping to gather was the number of items that are lost and never recovered versus the number of items that are lost and recovered, and kind of comparing stats. So for that, we had to start recording data at a certain point, which I think was August 2nd. So whenever this discussion comes back up again, we're hoping to have at least a couple months worth of at least that data that we could potentially look at. So I will say this, it's about noon. This has been a marathon of a meeting. I want to give anyone a chance if there's anything that you want to last minute add or say about any of the agenda topics. Please, by all means, mention it now. Otherwise, I think it's about time that we should conclude.
Do you need a motion for that, Miyako?
I was gonna ask a question after pausing for a moment, see if you want to say anything. But if you are ready to stop, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move, we adjourn.
I'll
Not that
second.
I don't love spending time with all of you, but
That was, so Anne's
Same
move.
here. My
Yeah,
second.
same.
Was that Jasmine seconding?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And I am declaring this meeting over at 11:56 a.m. And let's stop the recording.